Thank you all for coming. This is the first real group event here at ICON in 2 years. So we're launching something new tonight. I'm here with Greg Thatcher and John Preston, and I'm Bill Teeple. I think you all know us. And we had talked from the beginning of this show that we have been putting on for the last 2.5 months of our realistic artwork, of besides having the walkthrough where we talk about the artwork and our biographies and our about who we are, we thought it would be fun to just get together and sit and just talk about art and about realism, about the show, anything at all, just have a conversation. It was, and invite a few people. And then Werner offered to do some kind of video thing for us during this exhibition. And since we're down to the last few days and we did plan this event, it was kind of a spur of the moment event. I thought it'd be really nice if Werner came in and did this event. And we have some topics that we have thought that we'd like to bat around. And we will bat some of these ideas around and talk amongst each other. And then, so we won't be taking questions. It won't be question and answer like it was in the art walkthrough. But at the end, we'll take questions. But I just want to see what happens when we all start talking together. So maybe I will start with the first thing on my list here to get us going. This has been a very popular show. It's like struck a chord with the Fairfield audience. I'm not sure whether it would strike a chord with the most sophisticated black leather adorned New York art person. I would like to have that person, take another look at the refined craftsmanship of the art of painting that had reached a real apex in the late 19th century. I think because the whole modern movement of the last 120 years has been a reaction to realism. I think we're at a point where we maybe need a little bit of a check on that. I think it's good I like when I take people to Chicago to take them all through the wonderful Impressionist exhibit there and the post-Impressionism, to start with Romanticism and Neoclassicism and work right through the whole progression of the thing. And what I'm liking right now with this exhibit is to kind of take people back once more to when painting, the skill of painting and drawing was considered a moving craft, just as a craft, and to celebrate the beauty of the material world around us. And those artists, when I go to the museum and I see the works of the 19th century, well, actually I'm overwhelmed by the Renaissance painters too, but this kind of degree of perfection and excellence that was achieved in telling the story of life along with incredible abstract construction. It's something that we need to draw attention to once more. So I was really happy to put this show together, and it just sort of happened. I'd been doing these landscapes. I allowed myself to go back and just enjoy my roots of painting realistically again. And so I wanted to share some of this work. And then it happened that Greg approached me about showing some of his work here. I thought, that's great, we'll show. And then I thought the perfect combination was the three of us. So that's what we did. And the show has, really people have been, there's been great comments of enjoying this show. And I don't know, I raised the question in my little notes here of why do we think that it's people are really liking this show so much. If somebody wants to jump in here, I will hand them the mic.
I have something to say about realism.
Okay. We'll go wherever you want to go.
Wherever we want to go. So, realism is really important on one level, because when you look, as Bill was saying, at the history of art, and then you come into the 20th century, and most of the people, when they look at art, what's your experience a lot of times? It doesn't mean that it's bad art, but it's just there's a gap. Unless you've gone to school and spent a lot of time in museums, there's a gap between that disallows you, or you don't allow yourself to enter into the artwork. So the question is, why does that happen? Does anybody know?
I think that maybe people just don't know how.
That's part of it.
Instruction, or they just...
Yeah, that's part of it. It's really deep. It's really deep. Because in our old brain, there's a fight or flight reaction. And the fight or flight reaction is there to protect us from anything. We would think, well, we don't really need it anymore. But it also affects how loud people are, what kind of music you listen to, what kind of car you drive. It also affects the way we interact with art. So if there's something that's completely abstract, what do people do? They just walk away. They may go up and they may read the little tag, and I still don't get it. And then they just walk away. So there's some deep kind of situation that has to do, that's my thinking anyway. So realism is...
Could it just be that they're not being fed?
That's part of it, because I think with education that you open yourself up. Like when I take my students to Chicago and they look at a painting that's 10 feet by 30 feet, and they're saying, and I just say, just stand there and let your awareness be really loose, and then see what you can discover. So then that allows them to kind of enter into the work. And I say it doesn't matter if you like it or dislike it, because there's something there you can learn. And I think that's important. And the way that artists go through museum is completely different than other people. You have a really good pair of shoes, and you walk very quickly, and you go through everything, and you find something. How many remember Jeffrey Baker? Yeah, a lot of you do, yeah. So he would talk about sitting in front of a picture, and he talked about this wonderful poetic idea of living water. So there's this synchronicity, this dialogue that happens between you and the picture in your awareness, in your consciousness. And so it takes a while to get there, but if there's this thing that you don't understand or that you're fearful, even without you'll just move on. So if there's some remnant in the artwork that has some realism, then the person can identify with that to a certain extent, and then they surrender to the work. And then once they've surrendered in the work, we got them, because then we can move them around in the rhythms, the color, the texture, the shape, the form, all the different kind of qualities, and they'll stay in the picture. But if there's something that they don't understand, then they'll balk, they'll kind of pull back. So for me, having that smidgen, as my mother would say, of some realism is important. Now, the other thing is that all art is abstract and realistic at the same time. Because if you go deeper and you look into something, then you'll see that there's an abstract structure there. I mean, any of these works, you can look at them in that way. We're still dealing with the same principles that all artists have been dealing with for, thousands of years. But in our framework of time, it's important to have some emphasis on an abstract structure to a certain extent, because that's, the time that we live in. But if there's some reality in there, it just makes it easier for the person to come in, to get into the work. Because it's, it goes back to what's the purpose, Do you want people to look at your work? Do you want them to, to have some joy from looking at the work? Or do you want them to, look at the work and transcend, or, whatever it is that you want? So you have to find how can you pull them in? How can you pull them in? What's the way to create a link between the viewer and the artist, you know, because you've got the artist, you have the artwork, and you have the viewer, and those three have to communicate. And once the artist is done, then they pull out. The work's on its own. So then the viewer is looking. But you know, when you look at artwork, that you learn about the artist too, don't you? Yeah, to a certain extent. So does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate, I think back in the 80s, early 80s or something, when I was living in Maryland, to take a class at Maryland Institute of Art, and it was a color class. And one of the pearls of wisdom that I learned from the teacher was, and what you were talking about reminds me of it, in terms of how people relate or accept it. Like he was talking about a new movement of art, like something that's so different and that can be rejected, you know, by the critics and so forth, and the people who are viewing the art. But he said, so something like Dadaism or something, or Impressionism, there's a new movement, and something's done very differently, and people go, what? You know, what's going on? But he said that the key is that that makes it be accepted is that there has to be one quality or thing about the art that is familiar. So if there's a clock flying through the air, and it's Dadaism, we go, whoa, that's, you know, things are out of place, it doesn't make sense, I don't like it, but you recognize the clock. There's something familiar, the objects that are flying around are familiar to you. So from that you can connect and then just see what else is going on that's new and different. So you're on some familiar ground or step, and then you take the next step into the unknown, but you have something familiar with you that makes you feel at home or comfortable. And the other example may be Impressionism, where the technique, not the objects or the content as much as the technique, you know, maybe these little fine strokes, little, what is it, pointillism or little dots or something. And it's like, well, that doesn't, you know, when I look out at nature and at a pastoral scene, it doesn't really look just like that. But it is a painting of a pastoral scene or something in nature or what have you. So I recognize that, and that is familiar. So that's the link to bringing in something that's different, is to have something familiar as well.
There has to be a gateway in, one way or another. And what I was bringing out about the popularity of this show is that I think we nailed the access by presenting this work to this audience in this town, because people they love this town, they love the world around them, they're here, they love nature, and so we're singing their song. But the whole idea is to bring them into the finer levels that the three of us are seeing in these things. Because I want to, my work, have it be not, it's almost photographic in the way it's rendered, but I also want to create a poetic level of my experience of the world around me here in Fairfield that's more than a photograph, not as like flat as a photograph is, even though all the information's in there, but there's an emotional, poetic feeling I have about the world around me here, everywhere in Fairfield, that I want to get in these pictures. And John is just a master of taking us to this incredibly fulfilling artistic experience through very familiar rural, agricultural subject matter. So I think that's one of the reasons this show has been so popular in this town. It's the access. If a new trend, say abstract expressionism, throwing paint on a canvas, or completely abstract, is too new to you, you can't see it as art, my kid could do that kind of thing, well, then you need some translators, some people to take you in. And the famous, Clement Greenberg and Harold Rosenberg, these are the people, and even Bob Motherwell in that time, these are people that made the case for this work. And now you see a Rothko or a Jackson Pollock or something, or that type of art even in an architectural digest on someone's wall. You don't see something that, oh, my kid could do that. You see art, because it's entered into the history of art. It's become, it's seen as art. And in fact, in a way, this show for me is yes, everybody sees nothing but, you go on to Instagram and you go on to Facebook and everybody's sharing the thousands and thousands of variations of abstract expressionism. That's what people are doing now. That's art, you see. So I want to like reawaken for people the profound beauty of the craft of drawing and painting, and so that's kind of what I'm doing with this.
Bill made the point that you go and you see that there are thousands of people doing copies of abstract expressionism. There are also thousands of people who are making copies of so-called realistic things. And I am very concerned that people are losing our human ability to see.
Yeah, that's what
So much of what is happening in representational art, and particularly within the medium of watercolor, is the literal reproduction of photographs, of mechanical reproductions. I love a good photograph. You know, there's things that a photograph can do that a painting can't do. But I think it's kind of, I don't know, losing the identity of the artist when they kind of sacrifice themselves or submit to themselves what the device or the camera is doing. It's right now there are built into the camera, built into the screens that we use and stuff. I'm not a tech person, but there are kinds of algorithms that are sort of reinforcing our bad habit of saying that what the device sees is how we see.
Yeah, it's reality.
Yeah, it's changing our sense of reality. And because so much of our information, news, art, whatever, is coming to us through that, it's interesting. So I think it's interesting that within the whole art world, there are people who are trying to get back to, how do I see? You know, which should be different than what you see or what you see. And my goodness, we were so blessed with Jeffrey Baker to be that bridging person from when the realism sort of peaked about 1925 to 1930. And then modernism came in, and abstraction, and wonderful things were done. But the teaching of it, the seeing of it, the appreciating of it was lost, except through, apparently in England, they hung on to a little bit of it, which got into Jeffrey, which got here to Fairfield. The other places are because they had shut themselves off from the rest of the world, China and Russia. That is where realistic painting from the 30s, that the teaching of how to do it continued as a tradition. But I guess to transition into maybe what I do, I didn't really have any ideas about, when I was a kid, you didn't take Jackson Pollock seriously. He was just a guy throwing paint at the, but, now that I look at it, I can see things in it, It's not totally abstract. Jackson Pollock is not totally abstract.
There's a structure.
Yeah, you can forensically reconstruct where he was standing when parts of that paint was flung. He was in a little garage, smaller than the one I have, and just doing that. But back to the realistic. I guess Bill and Greg and we were in that generation where it had sort of languished, except within the context of illustration. Not to be underestimated. There's some wonderful things going on in illustration. But this artist, that artist, Philip Pearlstein, others, they would kind of hack one part of what was going on in the, before the 1930s, and another one would hack something that was going on before the 1930s. And then we were trying to build on that. Just being three guys that we go out, we look at our world, and we see things, and they move us, and then we want to, there's nothing really complicated or esoteric about being an artist. It's just something moves you, and you either, if you can't come up with words for it, then maybe you can come up with some scribble for it or something, or put it down. And that's all there is. And so we have been reconstructing this process. And, maybe it wasn't bad. Maybe, maybe the break gave us a break. And he does it one way, he does it another way, I do it another way. And we're all coming back to this thing. So, contemporary art, I like the fact that it's just sort of everything goes.
That's where we got to.
Yeah.
Which is great. They sort
Yeah.
of cleared the slate. Went everywhere.
Yeah, and it is, but I think the strength that realism has, as Bill said, it has the in. It has the entry point where you can get in. And you can experience how that person experiences the world. Whereas, say something like, Julian Schnabel, I have a hard time, it's these big, gigantic paintings that, two would fit in this room. And broken crockery, and they're embedded into things and stuff like that. And I don't know where to enter into that. But if I watch a YouTube, when Julian Schnabel talks about what's moving him, we're two of the same people. It's weird. So I think realism has a bit of an edge. Getting into, getting the person on the street, or just the ordinary person, finding their way into the formal aspects of art without having to go to, Yale and major in art history.
Because mostly I teach, but really what I teach is early Impressionism. That's what people want to paint. And so I taught that, but I also am quite a proponent of all of the work of the 20th century. I'm still wrapping my head around postmodernism, but so I can easily talk about the abstract art being purely about composition, so that it's like it's visual music, basically. So I can build the case and take people right in to my enjoyment of this these compositions, and just because something is a composition in sonic arrangements doesn't make it any good. Like music, what we're talking about is music. Just because you're doing abstract work with sonic elements doesn't turn it into Bach or Mozart or Chopin. You know, there's some genius using those elements to move us very, very deeply in this abstract world of visual, of sonic music. And visual, the great abstract paintings are really just visual music. But there's something in my soul that I started out with in this lifetime of loving to paint the world around me in this realistic way. And so I'm just now allowing myself and feeling like somebody's got to ring the bell of let's look back at the wonders of this realistic art when we look at art history. And people should feel free to access and to go forward in making art in this world that works from the more level of the stuff around us as an entry point.
I think you also have to, everything they said is completely true. No, go to a deeper level, because I think you have to look at the different work, or any artist's work. It's a love affair. You know, this is a romance. Each picture is a romance. And so you have to look at it and see how they made all the relationships, and see how the relationships with space and color and form and texture and all of that, how they work, how they all put together. Because basically what we're doing is that we're creating a perfect world. And a perfect artwork creates a perfect world, which then it lasts for a very, very long time. So that when you look at it, then that's what your experience is, because you experience it. You're not thinking about it, you're down here, you're in your heart, and you're going through it, and you're moving through the relationships, and then you just are in this wonderful space moving through, and it nourishes you. You know, it nourishes you, and I think that's what Jeffrey Baker was talking about, this idea of living water. So I think when you look at any artworks, and most especially the ones in this exhibit, you know, it's a love affair. And, you know, take the time, and that's what John was saying earlier, because everything is so immediate now. You've got drama, you've got film, you've got all these different kinds of things. The news is going, you know, 300 hours in a day. But there's so much information, and when you come to art, you have to settle down. And that's one of its purposes, is to allow you to settle down, especially this kind of work. So just take the time, look at the work, let it nourish you, let it feed you, let it allow you to transcend. Because the best art will be the ones that happens. You know, it doesn't matter if it's realistic, doesn't matter if it's Rothko, you know, anybody. If the work is very strong, even if it has limited relationships that it's working with, same thing happens. You just have to give it time. You just have to give it time. So that's important, and it's unfortunate that our culture is so far that way. But, you know, I think I can probably speak for all of you, but this is my experience, is that, you know, when we go to a museum, when an artist goes to a museum, it's like going to church. It's like going to a very special holy place, because these are the pictures or the things that have been created throughout time that people go and see. They don't know why. They don't know why when they go and they see a Michelangelo or they see a Vermeer and they start crying, or their knees get weak and they stop breathing. They don't know why, but they still go. And so the work has that potentiality to be able to create that incredible feeling. I'll give you a little experience. So in Chicago, at the Art Institute, Brancusi, how many people know Brancusi's work? Okay, he's unbelievable. So they used to have 3 or 4 of his pictures, or excuse me, his sculptures in one area. I used to go and I would kind of stand on the side and watch people when they would look at the work. And this one time there were two young people there, and they're sitting there and they're talking on their phone and they're kind of chit-chatting, and they're looking, and I looked at them, and I looked at the artwork, and I looked at them, and I looked at the artwork, and I had this incredible experience that the artwork had more consciousness than those two people who were alive. Now, you can imagine what that does to your brain, because you always think, oh, well, you know, a person, they're alive, I can touch it. No, these artworks, totally abstract artworks, had more power, had more consciousness than those two people. Completely changed the way I think about art. Amazing.
And people.
Yeah.
You see, what the artist, I wrote it right here, about what happens in the studio and what happens in the art gallery. It's two different things. The studio is a religious experience between the artist and the material object and God. It's this empowering of a material object with a inner spiritual reality. So the depth of consciousness of the artist is very important. I think what you're talking about is that Brancusi's level of sensibility and his level of consciousness and his skill and craft that he was able to then empower a material object with that level. So two things are involved: the artist deepening his ability to perceive and understand the reality that he is in, the nature of his relationship with God, and developing a vehicle that's capable of bringing that into the material world. Then that object, so that basically the artist's job is done in the studio. I always talk about the heroes. I won't go on into this, but Joseph Campbell discusses the hero's journey. I think of the artist as going into the mythic realm, deep in his studio. The studio is an entryway to the universal mythic realm. And in that place, the artist, brings back a boon from the mythic realm for the surface level of life to this boon that he's granted by the gods is then displayed to the group, and it heals the group. So it's a shamanic activity. So, but the artist goes to this play, goes to the studio, goes through this process, and all that we can think about is getting that unified state, that coherent state, into some kind of manifest form. And every discussion of any kind of great art throughout history talks about these qualities of the work of art. It has coherence, it has unity, it has profound silence, all of these things. So that's what the artist puts into his work, whether it's a realistic work or a Brancusi simple shape, or it's realism. Because those are just the material surface. It's made in material, and it's made of those elements of the world around us, the material world around us, and it's then loaded, loaded with consciousness. And that's the job. So that's our job. It's not what anybody's going to think about, how much money it'll make, or whether our reputation is this or that. That has nothing to do with what the job of the artist is. He goes to the studio and does his thing. And then there's the artifact of that process is the artwork. Then that artwork is brought into the art gallery or the art museum, and it's set on a pedestal. So I think of the art gallery or the art museum really as a sacred temple, and where the object that has been empowered with coherence is displayed for the populace, for the people, and the people gathered around it they're made more coherent in their whole being and their nervous systems just by being in the presence of that thing. So that's kind of what you're talking about. Here, say something.
It's interesting what you say about when we go to the museum, it's like going to church.
Yeah.
the New Testament, it talks about prayer. It talks about prayer should be done in a closet. Now, when those verses were written in the first century, people didn't have closets. They had 2 garments at most, and those would be the upper middle class people. So when it says go into your closet, it really means, where is your private space? Where do you get off from the rest of the world and get alone and enter into something that's a little deeper than all that other mess that we have to deal with? And the best studio experience, or the best on-location painting experience, is that kind of thing, where you're just you and the subject, and there's some kind of, I would dare say, prayerful communication with the subject. It does, you could be a painter, you could be a photographer, you could be a dancer that feels something and you just need to jump around about that. You could hear a melody or something. I remember the first time driving through southern Germany. I could hear it, the French horns that Beethoven, that flat plain area before you get to the Alps. It's just something happens to the artist that it's private. It's a connection to the world, which I think we all desperately crave. And then it's a powerful enough experience that you can't just let it rattle around in there. You got to concretize it in some way. So, either jump around, come up with a melody or some chords, scribble something on some paper or something like that. But, yeah.
I think one thing John's saying is it's self-referral. That you look at something, and it happens to all of us. When Bill was talking, when we had the little walk through a little while ago, and he was talking about, he sees everything as beautiful. Now, think about that. That's not the norm for most people, because we have the blinders on. I have to get to everybody's to get the milk to get home so my wife won't get mad, or whatever the situation is. So there's the blinders there. But Bill doesn't have those. So he goes around and he's just enamored by what he sees. So then he has to do something with it. There's that, as John was saying, there's that you have to do something with that, because our job, that's how we talk, is through these things. We can communicate what we feel through something that's two-dimensional, flat, and it's either paint or pencil or whatever. That's amazing when you stop and think about it, because the level of experience that can be transferred to someone if they take the time to look at it is amazing. So it's magic. Art's magic. We're just simple guys. We like to work with our hands. That's the basic bottom line. But we have a connection with nature so that we can, as Bill was saying, we can bring forth something. We can make something a reality of what we experience. And that's our job. That's our blessing. And our job then is just to do that, to stay focused on that, and not get sold out to anything else, because that's really important. That's why we were born. That's why we're doing what we're doing. A lot of it, I think, if you stop and think about it, it's, as I said, it's a love affair. When you're painting and you're looking and you're trying to understand and you want to make that experience alive for someone else, the viewer. You go really deep into it. You go very deep into it. And all these little relationships, you bring them all out, and then the thing pops. So then it takes on its own life. So
And that is the bottom line. It's all these other side reasons to make art, they get in there because there's pressures to pay your rent, and there's pressures to have, you like to be liked by people. You like, when you make something, somebody likes it, then you think, oh, maybe I should make another one of those. And there's all these pressures that can influence making of art, but it isn't the job. The job is, you're in there and you're working on this thing, and it's either yes or no. You want to get all the way to everything is yes, and you just keep at it until everything is fine-tuned, so it has nothing to do with anybody else or what anybody else might think or what is considered art of the time or anything. You have something that you feel like you want to comment on, like Greg was saying, and then it's all on you then to satisfy yourself. You have to know that, yes, that's the thing I'm trying to say. And it's easier said than done because all sorts of other stuff creeps in there. Like you get halfway there and it's kind of okay, and you think, that may be okay. And somebody came along and they really like it. And so, see, artists get sidetracked so easily from the job. The job is what we've all been saying here. It's this thing that happens in the studio between you and the work of art until it's coherent. And you go in there with this knowing of what you want to do. You may not know exactly what it's going to look like, but you know when you've got what you're after, and that's the job. But then it's, you halfway through, it's that thing called doubt. Doubt can ruin everything. So you'll doubt that what you know to be what you are after and what you've got, maybe it's stupid. And then you start to see it as stupid. That's the craziness of doubt. And then you can't see it anymore. So you just have to have various techniques to let go and be true to yourself. And then you'll say, oh, right, I've got to fix that. I've got to take this further. That's fine. They liked it. He liked it. Somebody bought it like that. But I'm not satisfied that somebody bought it like that, and they love it. And I'm sure that there's these levels that we've created in there that this person was able to access and get out of it. They have it, but I'm the one that has to be completely happy in the end. So that's why I do so many of the same thing, almost exactly the same thing, over and over again, because I'm trying to get at further into it, or for another version of it that I really want to try.
You know, the problem with being an artist is we have been, in our generation and through art, things, you're supposed to be doing something important, and, and all this stuff. And then, like, I have to hide and pretend that, I was attracted to that thing, How do you explain simple attraction? And I try to defend it by saying that, well, we make some of the biggest decisions in our life based on simple attraction. Who we marry, what career we go into, where we live. These are giant, big decisions, but we do them by, in the end, simple attraction. And, well, just in my case, I can't speak for, well, I guess Greg with the hues and Bill with what you've painted, we saw these things and something spoke to us. I drove out here from the Amherst course. I knew I was going to major in art. I had no idea what form that was going to take. Having been exposed to what was available in Baltimore and the Maryland Institute and stuff, I probably would have been an abstract sculptor, more on the lines of like Jim Shrewsbury or something, somebody like that. But somewhere between Peoria and Monmouth, Illinois, coming out in late August and seeing these incredible, thunderheads and things like that, it's like, well, it's going to be landscape painting, what are you going to do? And I tried to work my way onto that kind of thing, and it's developed obviously over time. But gee whiz, what's wrong with simple attraction? I mean, does it have to be that deep? Jeez, why can't we just go with that? I mean, sure. There are things that are glitzy and glamorous, and we go for those kind of things. But they don't satisfy for long. So if you've got something that's kind of like working for you over time, that you keep coming back to, or that you keep trying to perfect, then you know that there's some connection between you and that. And I guess that's better than just you or just that. There's a circular thing going on there. But I guess that's part of Bill has a point here, commitment as personal dharma as an artist. That
That was Greg's.
Yeah, and we can't help it. We're stuck.
I have a word to say on that one.
That's our thing, and it's not just our thing. I mean, there are other ways to, that people are built into that. There's something that drives your life,
Well, I'll let Greg say
Yeah.
what he wants to say, then I'll say something.
There's actually no choice. There's no choice. Because, when you're doing your dharma, that's what you're supposed to do. So you just do it. You just get on with it. And there's a lot of things that come up with that. There's, one thing I mentioned at one point is that as we get older, you stop questioning so much and you just get on with the work that you need to do. And, I've been doing yew trees since 1991. And, Rothko had lots of issues about repetition, what he was doing, and he thought it wasn't right and all that. But, the point is that I'm their spokesman. So I just have to go, find what tree needs to be drawn, show its beauty, and then move on to the next one without sort of getting all tied in knots if it's going to be this or if it's going to be that. And just stay true to what I should be doing, and then everything else kind of takes care of itself. But we don't have a choice. And we're lucky in that way for artists, because it's in a lot of people, it's like, what's my dharma? And they keep trying to search around with it. It's like, if we don't create, then we don't feel fulfilled. There's something that's deeply missing in our life. So it's important for us to be able to express ourselves, because that's how we talk, And if you look at all these pictures, even though he's talking about, doing the landscape, these are all extremely silent if you look at them. They're very pure, they're very simple, but there's a deep kind of spiritual quality and silence about his work, and you can see it in Bill's, and I guess you could see it in mine occasionally too, right? So, but all that's there, and so that's what he's trying to express again and again, and perfecting it again and again and again, so that he's becoming more familiar with it, but he's giving it to you. It's a gift. He's giving it to you.
Well, I like very much what all of you were saying, but no, I'm getting silly now. I like very much the simple attraction thing, and you raised the issue that I think needs to be addressed, and that's people feel like what they are supposed to do, especially if they go to art school and get involved with the art scene, that they have to come up with the next new thing, that they have to do something that's never been done before, that's the most unique, and so it almost got to be in the art world that doing something shocking and different, just something different. In fact, I think that was built into me when I studied art in school.
Same with me.
You had to, I had to rack my brain to come up with something different, something that the others weren't doing, because that's sort of the way it's all promoted, and the famous people are the people that came up with the next new thing. However, I think you're on to the secret, and I think that we're talking about the secret tonight, which is that you simply have to love. You have to fall in love, and then you have to figure out a way to talk about your love visually as artists to other, and get that love across one way or another. And so it doesn't matter whether you're working in a style of art that's been done over and over and over again. It's just or whether you're working in found object junk work, or it doesn't matter the style or the scene you're involved with. It's whether you can empower that thing with some consciousness, some depth, and some meaning. Basically, love. You have to. You can't make art. You can't even actually experience beauty unless you love. The gift to the lover, to the one who loves, is the deliverance of the experience of beauty. And so to make art, you have to be a lover, and then you have to find those qualities of beauty. You can just be in love, but the artist finds those qualities of, and the harmonics and the relationships in that thing before your eyes that you're in love with, and draws those things and puts them into some kind of an homage that you're paying to the one you love.
What happened, I think, in our history was that as Impressionism went out, and then the other movements came in, they were very super creative, I think, until about 1915. It was incredible what they did in Paris. And then, of course, you had the abstract movement in New York and all that. But I think the undercurrent was that Impressionism and Realism were actually extremely superficial. And so I think that's part of the problem. Now, I'm thinking that all three of you have tried abstract art yourselves, right? And maybe you kind of got tired of your own cooking, right? I mean, maybe you got tired of your own shapes that you came up with, and that led you back to nature, because maybe the shapes in nature were extremely powerful and elegant, and so that kind of maybe led you back to that. And so that's what happened to me. And my brother's a photographer. We were on different coasts, and we both went through our angel shapes and our bird abstractions. We incredibly, I don't know, maybe we were talking to each other in our sleep or something, but we went through these phases, but then we burned out on them because it was too superficial. It was too easy. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some really great abstract painters like Arthur B. Carls or Kandinsky. Obviously, did some incredibly good stuff. But I think that the modern art world has, in many cases, just dismissed, the profundity of what you've been talking about, which, started with Cézanne, and, has, one of my favorite artists is Daniel Garber, and he did these really big abstract or realistic, impressionistic paintings that have this incredible energy to them. That's just extremely transporting. I mean, you stand in front of it and you're in another world. So, but I don't think he was just attracted to these scenes just because they reminded him of something romantic, in a superficial way. I think he was, profoundly moved by the shapes and then all the color resonance that he saw, which he was extremely highly skilled, So anyway, I just want to interject that and see what you guys had to say about that. Thank you.
Well, I think one of the things we're getting at here is that we saw something begin to happen in 1860 in Europe, in France, and it was the birth of modernism. Where we say modernism began is a debatable issue. It could go back to 1797 if we wanted to go there, but really this new way of seeing the world and a new way of acting in the world and a new way of being in the world, a new paradigm sort of happened around 1860. And it led to the Impressionists, and it led then on, and things started changing really fast. By the turn of the 20th century, we were changing really fast in culture in so many ways, and the way we saw Newtonian physics versus Einsteinian physics, and everything was changing really fast. So the entirety of the 20th century artistic expression was this flow into this new realm of the inner side, the subjective side being allowed to be expressed, emotions and feelings, and letting go of all of the tight boundaries that bound people in the 19th century. It was an escape and an explosion. But we're kind of coming full circle, which is, I think, what you're kind of getting at. We're coming back to where we've had that experience, and there were many deep experiences that culture had, and beautiful artistic expressions from this inner realm of the dynamics of form and color and all of this being expressed from deep within the person. And some people went deeper, and some people just copied the surface level of that. But there was something very profound that had to happen in the 20th century. But now we're coming into a new period, I think, of integration, where the two sides, the inner and the outer, can be more integrated. And I think that's what we're talking about. We're making the case right now with this show and with our talk tonight about not, it's almost the canon to dislike realism in the West, in the modern art world. So we're making the case for, let's go back, let's indulge ourselves in the perfection of the Renaissance, art of the Renaissance. I mean, Da Vinci to me is like the ultimate. So I want people to go back and realize that Da Vinci was so deep. See, he's such an example. He started painting where everybody else left off. Everybody else got it right. The perspective was right, the rendering was right, the story was right, the philosophy in there was right, everything was right. But Da Vinci could go there, but what he did is he kept going, so that it was almost like he did nothing with each wave after that. But it was that subtlest little something that he put in with each wave after that that took his works to a transcendent level. And so I started being more disinterested in the 20th century and more interested in the peaks of art history. I wanted to know what it was about that peak in the Renaissance, Da Vinci, the peak in the height of Monet and the height of all the different periods. There was something transcendent at the peaks. And I wanted to know what that was. So that's what interested me. And so now we'll see where it goes from now. I think that the art world is in this pluralistic, anything goes state that we're in, where the critics don't even know what's good art, and they try to go with what's happening and try to explain it, but they don't. I think everybody's pretty lost right now. So that set us up for a new rebirth, finding the true way of what art's all about. And that's kind of what we're talking about tonight.
It's also just going deeper, because you were talking about you were photographing trees or you were birds or whatever. But as
My
you,
brother's photographs, yeah.
yeah, but
I
as
was painting and he was doing photographs.
okay, but the point is that as your experience grows, then you go deeper and you go deeper and you go deeper, and so that's what's important. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And because if you look at a lot of the work that's being done, it's pretty superficial.
It doesn't feed anybody. I mean, look at what Jerry Seinfeld said in one of those TM promotions. He was saying, I got all these openings, and they're not doing anything for me at all.
Yeah, well, he's being honest, and I think that's really important. So, because it's as the culture develops, then there's this yearning for what Bill was saying. There's this yearning for something that's deeper, the yearning for something that's more profound, something that's solid, and that can be expressed in art. It can be expressed in music and drama and film and dance and business. It can be however you do it, whatever field you're in. If you do it properly, it's an art form, And I think if people go to that level of skill, dedication, and focus, then they can create these things that are absolutely gorgeous in whatever field it is, And I think that's important, not to limit it to any one field, any one art. I think it's important to like really spread wide and go deep, because I think that's what we need. That's the yearning that we're all feeling at this point, and that's just, what's going on in the world. It's important. It's really important, because the world, everything's crazy. Everything's crazy. Everything's like so fast that, where do you find your balance? You have to go inside, as Johnny was saying. Where's this silent place? Where is that? And, we all are searching for that. Meditation or art or dance or, whatever. All of those things are important, but we have to find where that is, that little sacred place for us, And we find that in our studios.
Well, yeah, we're lucky to have it too.
Yeah, no. Yeah, everybody is, yeah.
I mean, we need the therapy these days more than ever. We need the therapy. I would say.
Yeah.
This is the question of our age, is solving this particular problem. And we're talking about it in the context of visual art, but it's the issue of our era. Finding truth, honesty, authenticity, because everything is the opposite of, everything is backwards right now. But that's good. We've really set ourselves up for flipping around and finding ourselves again.
And we don't have to capture the entire magnificent beauty of nature. If we just capture a fraction of it, we're there.
Yeah, but the fraction, if you do this art thing we're talking about, if you capture wholeness in that one little thing, then that it contains wholeness. So if that thing has got the beauty,
I would say it is. It doesn't contain it, it is. There's no gap. There's no gap. And that's the power. That's the power. I mean, I don't know if you've ever gone, and Vermeer is one of my favorite artists, and so I was lucky to go to London and see some of his work. And I'm a big person, so I can stand right in front of the picture and everybody gets out of the way, which is really great. So I'm looking at his work, and then all of a sudden I completely transcend. I can't breathe. Stop. Everything just, and then it's like, oh. And then I would move to another picture, and then I would not quite like that, but I would I would breathe again, and then I would just keep going back because it's, you want to have that. And for something it's two-dimensional, it's flat, it's painting, it's magic.
Absolutely.
It's absolute magic. And so, and there's the one with that he has with the milkmaid. And there's the drop, and it's like, you're waiting for it to drop. It's never going to drop, but you're always there. You're 100% waiting for the drop to drop, and you're going to hear.
And did you feel like you were outside of time, like you were there at that hundreds of years ago?
I was just 100% in his pictures, so there was no sense of time.
Right, you're
And
outside of time.
Yeah.
But that's the universe.
That's
That's the universality of art,
yeah.
because every artist finds eternity in the moment, in the thing, in this world, this relative world, in this time and space, in Fairfield in 2022. The artist looks and sees the timeless, eternal, universal in everything around him, and he puts that into the art, and that's what the audience connects with. Is that perfection inside. It's the kind of heaven on earth thing. That's what the artist is really building heaven on earth.
They crave that energy.
Yeah.
So when people are going through a Monet exhibit, they're not looking at it for, that's a seascape or someplace I, visited. That's not the reason. It's because they walk through it and they're totally nourished.
Yeah.
They'd be in a horrible mood and then come out in a super great mood by the end of that exhibit.
Yeah. And that's magic. It's complete magic, which is wonderful.
Existence itself is absolutely impossible magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the artist gets a clue of that and
Yeah.
talks about it. When we talk about it however we can.
So in a universe where no two snowflakes are alike, every personal vision is precious and unique and valid. And because it's that way, personally I feel it was made to be that way. We were supposed to appreciate the way you do, the way you do, the way you do, the way you do. To find something that I find but you don't. It's, Vermeer, oh my gosh. When I'm 9 and my dad takes me to the National Gallery and I see the girl with the red hat, that was one of the pictures that it's this big. Yeah. And I was like,
Vermeer is exactly that same thing I was describing about Da Vinci.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And then years and years and years later, I maybe like 25 or something, it was one of those courses, what was the rounding course in D.C.?
Yeah.
Or something. At the same time, the National Gallery had the girl with the pearl earring because the Rijksmuseum was redoing their ventilation or something like that, so they sent everything over to the National Gallery while the renovations were being done. And that girl with the pearl earring was in the middle of a wall, and you would come into the room, and there were other great Dutch paintings there, but that one, bam! And the feeling for me was like I had just asked her to marry me, and she had turned and said, yeah. But it was something about that, and it was very important painting to me because maybe a year and a half earlier, in Shelley Levin at that time, in her class, she had us do a master copy, and I did that painting. Yeah, and that's the power of art. It's just something about that.
Yeah, that's what we're all striving for.
Yeah, and realism, on the one hand, I get what people say, yeah, they've done that, geez, But on the other hand, we're all new creations, we're all new snowflakes. And every one of us is seeing this world with our eyes. It's the new eyes and stuff. And my goodness, nowadays, stuff, it's one thing after another, and it's not like realism can't be new or unique or anything like that, It's like,
It's a little twist. It doesn't
yeah.
have to be a reinvention of the wheel.
No, we don't have to reinvent it. Your version, my version, his version, your version.
I got to say something. So what it needs is a soul.
There you go.
It needs a soul. So when you connect up, if the artist is able to put themselves 100% into the work, which takes time because you're balancing all the little relationships. And if you can put that in there as much, then the artwork has a soul. It's alive. Doesn't matter if you look at it or not. It generates consciousness. It's putting something out into the environment. And there's a number of artists that would talk about that you could go in and see their exhibit. You don't even have to open your eyes. There's something that happens to you, some power that comes to you. And it comes because all the relationships have been perfected. So it's that idea of the soul, of being able to create that, that's the power. Because you're going really deep through yourself. When somebody sees an artist, they go like it, and then they stand back, and then they go like that, and then they stand. What's happening? It's all self-referral. So you look at something, and then you transcend to a certain, not with a small t transcend, you look at it, and then, oh, there's a mistake, I have to fix it. So you fix it, then you stand back again. So it's a constant sort of relationship, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And depending upon who you are and how complicated your work is, that can go on for a long time, But it's that idea of getting it right and not compromising on how long it takes or whatever. And if you can do that, then it creates that idea of a soul. It has a power. It's alive. It's alive. And I think another thing that people don't understand, and they don't think about it, is that when we sell a picture and it's in your house, and when you look at it, something comes back to us. Something comes back to us because you're appreciating its beauty, and so something comes back to us, which is a really a wonderful thing, because you're relating to it on that deeper level and nourishing that in yourself, and then it also comes back to us. So it's, as Bill was saying, it doesn't matter about the money. I mean, it kind of does, doesn't it? But it's that on that much deeper level, and that's the area where we're going, I think, more and more, is that way. And the work will be all different kinds of work. It won't all be this or won't all be that. We're all using the same tools and for the language, but it's having that, being able to capture that deeper kind of quality. I mean, we could talk about Vermeer, we could talk about Rothko. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been and seen some of his larger pictures. They're unbelievable. There's a Rothko chapel in Houston, and it's an interfaith, I guess you would call it a church, I guess. And you go in, and I think there's 3 very large, I mean, they're as big as this and about 20 or 30 feet long. And you go and you sit down, and you have to close your eyes. So, I got my eyes closed, I might as well meditate. So you meditate, and then when you open your eyes, what you experienced in meditation is exactly what's on the wall. That's a powerful experience. And his work is completely abstract, or is it? It's completely full and completely empty at the same time, which is the nature of the universe, isn't it? Because it has to have it both. It has to be complete fullness, but it also has to incorporate its opposite. So both things exist at the same time. So in our work, we have to include, all those different kind of qualities in each stroke, each color, each texture, each form, like that. So it has fullness and emptiness, fullness and emptiness, fullness and emptiness. So
I love this work. And I have to say, the older I get, the more I fall into this work. I'm in this state of mind, this beauty. I mean, some of you know my work. It's just, that's nourishes me. And I think the work comes from that deep silence, and I see it in the work. But I keep wanting to say, what about Anselm Kiefer? You know? I mean, where there's this turmoil and there's this, growing out of the whole German history and the Holocaust and how he works the material. And, you see, these ravaged landscapes, but there's some inherent beauty. And it's maybe an antithesis to this or not. I don't know. But when you said soul, I thought what I feel in Anselm Kiefer is that sense of soul. Him deeply going into the depths of what it is to have come out of that history. I mean, I couldn't remember the name of this particular painting of there's lit lanterns that flank each side. And I think it's something that the heroes or the ancestors, I don't know, that's one of them. And it's just there's a poignancy and a beauty and a recognition. And I also want to acknowledge that that's also, it's realistic. And it has a sort of a hard-won beauty, a silence that comes under the depth of that angst. And I want to bring him into the picture.
The thing is that we've seen marvelous expressions of the depth of people's perception and their souls and their levels of awareness and their world they're working out of and the karma they're working out of, expressed in the 20th century. We've seen this whole place that art has gone in the 20th century has been an amazing trip. And so and I always say to people, you go in the museum and you see this work and you wonder why it's there. Well, there's a reason that every piece of art is in the Metropolitan Museum. Every piece has the stuff we're talking about, and that's why it's in there. And so we could start to go through 20th century or contemporary art and just we'll start to sing the praises of how we're moved or we're individually moved or by certain works. And Anselm Kiefer is one of the great artists of our time. But, you don't feel his journey, you feel the journey of an entire race, an entire generation, an entire point in time, 20th century time, that's working itself out. And not only 20th century, his stuff is so mythic and multi-dimensional, there's so much there. But there is that German angst, that the German trying to save us all through the art, in his work. It's great.
So I'm a more oral person. I'm a more musical person. So I'm looking at now, how can I gain a greater appreciation of the visual art? So all of these pieces, it's a completed piece compared to music, where it starts with usually just even some of Beethoven's work, just in the first measure, just an interesting idea, and then he develops that. And so much music, Beatles music and pop songs and stuff. So, and certainly what you've been talking about, Rembrandt, Michelangelo, these great pieces that there's an immediate connection. So I'm looking at maybe not so famous pieces, these works. John's work, John and I were students 42 years ago here, and John was painting away, and I'm not good at perspective drawing or anything like that, but musically following the development of a motive and a piece of music, from symphonies to simple songs and such. So how can I appreciate art in a way that from maybe the artist's perspective more, and maybe looking at it like maybe going into it like a moving piece. Now, I've seen some of John's Facebook live painting things. So you're seeing just a sketch and then how he develops that, and he puts layers on it and colors, and it all comes to life. So if I were seeing each piece from a primal elementary and then developing into a full piece, that would be really entertaining. That would be, so I'm just trying to see how I can appreciate a lot more from my limited.
No, it's not limited. It's not limited at all. There's that once a person comes into the art, then there's in music there's a rhythm. So there's rhythm in art. So it's moving your eye throughout the composition. And it happens by shape, it happens by color, it happens by texture, it happens by... So if you just allow your awareness to kind of be simple, you'll notice how your eye moves around, right? You ever notice that? So it's moving around, and it's moving around by virtue of the rhythm. So if you look at this one here with the train thing, okay? So you see the roundness of the black shapes where the lights are? So look further back. Isn't there a repetition of that round shape? See it? In the trees in the background? Okay, so that's a relationship that creates a rhythm between those two different things. And then you have vertical lines, you have horizontal lines, you have diagonal lines. All of those lines create a directionality, but also a direction. It's almost like a tension, because some lines go fast and some lines go slow. And then you also look at the color. Now the color in the foreground, look how sweet that, it's a pink. You see that? So when something's warm, it advances, comes closer to you. So then you look back and then you see the other colors, and then they're more muted, and so they slow down a little bit, so they don't come so far this way. So all those little things are it's a repetition. And the repetition creates a movement, and as long as the repetition is balanced, then you'll stay in the picture. Just like if there's good music, if the rhythm in the music is pleasing to you, you'll listen to it. If it's not, it's like, because it doesn't make you feel good. So it's the same thing in an artwork. Exactly the same thing. It's just a matter of looking kind of as I was explaining to you, and then analyzing, oh yeah, now I see how my eye's moving around, and I like that, and then there'll be all these different little things that are happening as your eye moves around, and that's feeding you information, it's giving you information. It's doing something to your nervous system, it's creating something inside of you, so that that feeling that John was trying to get across, he's conveying that to you by the colors, by the texture, by the form, by the muted colors, by the verticality, by all those different kinds of things are all feeding you information, but it's all a rhythm. It's all a balance. So it's the same in music, it's the same in art. Nice, beautiful cars are the same thing. They have different kinds of things where they all the different parts relate to each other. So art's everywhere, it's everywhere. It's just a matter of seeing how it's made, if you will. Seeing how the person who created it. Because if you were going to go and buy a car and it just, it was a cardboard box, you'd think, it's really ugly, I don't want to drive that thing. But if they had something that was beautiful, you'd think, whoa. Because it would be something that would feed you. It would be nice to look at. So it's the same, it's the same thing pretty much. Furniture design, how you paint your house, how you do landscaping, all those different kinds of things are creating relationships, creating a balance so that it gives you a nice feeling inside. So just kind of watch look at something and just kind of watch, and then that's how you learn.
Well, really, we're talking about the abstract side of,
Yes.
of a work of art. The great abstract, the great painters of the past generally worked in some kind of reference to subject matter up until the 20th century. But the great art had the elements he's talking about. Everybody was painting the Madonna in 1500, but there's only one Raphael. The Raphael Madonnas are so abstractly, perfectly constructed. The unity of the compositions is so perfect. And the feeling level, he got it all in there. The feeling level, but what we're talking about right now is more the abstract construction, is the line and energy flowing and shape and composition, color harmonics and all of that. That is what makes paintings, work. And so if we put I used to put a not very well done Madonna next to a masterwork like a Raphael, and your eye will go back and forth, and you just feel the difference. So that's the abstract side. So there's always the abstract construction of the forms and the shapes and the energy being worked with. And in 20th century art, we left off the subject matter, and it was just like music. It was just letting the composition guide your eye through an experience. And the best ones have unity and all of these different elements, just like jazz is modern contemporary art, especially abstract. Well, a lot of abstract contemporary or modern art has a lot of relevance to jazz because there's a lot of improvisational elements involved with the way it comes about. But it's layering of patterns that work beautifully together. But the one thing that you did bring out that I think is important is that when you look at a painting, time is involved. It's not just frozen. And the eye is led by the great artist. The eye is led through the painting. And the goal is to not let any energy escape from the rectangle. So you have to move the eye, and you feel it in your body and your emotions as an artist. If all the energy is going over here, or it's dumping out the corner or something, you feel that you've got to put a line there that brings the energy back into the painting. So you're always moving the eye of the viewer, but you get there by your eye being satisfied with its journey that you've created for itself. And then the viewer comes and has this experience. And it's not conscious. You're seeing the railroad lights, whatever they're called, and a nice scene. And you don't, but you feel really good about it. It's nostalgia and the time of the day, the feeling, the colors. That's all there, but you're not that conscious of it. But you know you're feeling good, and it's making you feel good.
One other thing. Art is completely abstract and completely realistic at the same time. So it has to have both of those qualities. So we were mainly, when I was pointing those things out, as Bill was saying, that those are abstract principles. But that's like the bones. That's what makes the thing work. That's what helps. And then it's that rhythm, creating that rhythm of moving you through. And if you think about music and you think about how music, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? And if you think, if you look at rock and roll, they have drums, and then they have a bass, and then they have an electric guitar, and then they have a singer, and they're all just different layers of adding to a complete composition. How is that different? It's just, ours, one's here and one's there. But it's the same, it's kind of the same thing. And I think if you think about it in that way, then it'll make it easier for you. Yeah, but just look. And just pay attention to what is happening in your eyes and what's happening in here, you know, because certain work will make you not feel so good, and other work will just like, but they're still moving you through something, you know, they're giving you an experience. But it, as Bill said, takes time. You have to sit and look at them. You don't want it to come like a lot of the work that's being done now. It's like, it's just right in your face, and it's like, okay. But you want to have something.
Catchy melody that drives you crazy.
Yeah, you can't get it out of your head. But you know, it's like you want something that you can sit with. You know, you can kind of sit with.
And keep coming back to.
Yeah, and that you keep realizing deeper and deeper levels to it. Yeah, you want to see it again. You want to sit with it again. You want to just understand it again. That's what Matisse said. He wanted to create work that was like an armchair that you would come home and then you would sit in. I mean, people thought he was crazy, but you stop and think about, what a beautiful thing. You know, what a beautiful thing.
That's funny, because you know, if I had to pick a song to describe what I do, it would be I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it. You know, I think realism gets short shrift in that there are just volumes of experiences and emotions that happen for us. When when you're sitting under those trees, or when you saw that, gosh, I'm wondering where you were at with that one with the river. Or, this one here, you were talking about the one with the semaphore, the railroad semaphore. You can get formal qualities out of that. You can get other things out of that. And then there's all these things that I get out of that. What you don't know that I know is that maybe 60 feet to the left there was another artist painting basically the same scene but from a different angle. Yeah. This one over here, the grain elevator over the thing, I had just dropped my dog off at a specialty animal hospital for a very invasive surgery that was ultimately unsuccessful. And there was another artist there, friend, painting with me. And she just, also a dog lover. And she kept up a kind of just a general conversation, that got me out of the angst involved in that situation and just got me into that perfect painting state. Every one of these have a little very personal story, but then again, I love that the fact that a person can come to a realistic painting and it may mean something entirely different to them that is way out of our experience, kit. And I think there's a power to realism in that vein that maybe abstraction doesn't have. I think we still have, if we're careful and we're good painters, we still have the formal qualities, composition, color, use of textures, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I enjoy about I wish there was a better term than that, representational painting, is the fact that other people can come to this picture that I had my experience with, and they can have, it just maybe something totally different, a whole nother range of things. There's some breadth to it that like I say, the abstraction, Julian Schnabel, I can't get much from his paintings, but, I watch a YouTube where he talks about what he's feeling, and I feel like, God, we're two of a kind. But it's harder for me to enter into his paintings until I hear him talk about it. Then at least I feel like maybe I'm giving somebody something of an entry point, you know, and realism does that sort of thing, you know, and I guess because we're making images, we have to have some sort of reference point, you know. I envy music in that music is absolutely abstract. And yet, wow, you know, something will go up your spine. You know? Yeah, it's just, you know, Kashmir by Led Zeppelin or something, you know. I mean, I want that played at my funeral, you know. But the different thing, you know. Isn't it a wonderful thing that we have all these different mediums, the visual mediums, the photography, the painting, the dance, the music, the stand-up comedy. I personally think stand-up comedy is the highest art form. But
The hardest.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's like it goes from the person saying the joke to the person laughing at the joke. There's no materials involved. It's immediate, you know. Oh, yeah, it's like soul to soul, you know. It's just, I envy them that. But you know, geez, you know, I mean, we paint because that's how we were built, you know. We had to, our way of dealing with the experience of life is that it's powerful, it's moving, and we have to scribble something to make it just that little bit more concrete, that it's not like a abstract thing rattling around inside of us that, you know, that we feel we have to do something.
I think part of it too is that by doing the artwork, then we understand. And I think that's important. You know, if you're working with something and you have a feeling about it and you start to try to paint the feeling, then you understand it. And I think that's part, and discovering what it is and then perfecting it so that it gets into the work. I think that's important. Any other questions or anything?
I think we've come to the end of the evening, because we could go on, but
Yeah, we
and
go all
it's a
night.
good place to stop, I think. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, John. Thank you all for coming.